Hi, everyone, and welcome to Autism Hope Library. I have a really special guest, and I think this, show is going to really help you with so many questions that you probably have. We have David Terk from Serenitas Special Needs Planning, and he is the executive director. And today we're going to talk about, basic conservatorship questions like, what is a conservatorship? Do we need a conservatorship? So welcome, David. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kristen. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again as well. I know when my son was first diagnosed, I didn't even want to think about this. Like, it was one of those thoughts, like, I hope I never have to think about it. And then you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I got to think about it.
Oh, no, he's 17 and a half now.
Yeah, so you're like, well, actually, he turned 18. So, like, he turned 18 in April. So now it's like, yeah, I gotta do something now. Yeah, around 17 and a half is when you're like, oh, darn, I got to do something, And so, for those watching, first of all, let's go into, let's go a little bit into the background of what you do at your company.
So what we do is we only do one thing, and that is focus on families who have a loved one living with a disability and providing what's called comprehensive special needs planning. So through our firm, Serenitas Special Needs Planning, there are 4 areas that affect the lives of anyone living with special needs. There's legal planning, making sure that you have all the proper documents together to assure a smooth transition, security, and quality of life for your loved one. There's government benefit coordination, understanding how much my loved one is entitled to through government benefits at different milestones, because they do change throughout time. And how do we structure things to be able to maximize that throughout life without interruption? That dovetails with budget and financial planning, making sure that the dream that we have for our loved one and the lifestyle we want them to have can actually be funded. Everything has to be based in a strong legal and financial framework. And then the last element is called lifestyle planning. And this is as or more important than any of the other things that the other 3 elements. And that is a letter of, the lifestyle planning is everything about your child. Everything about what makes a good day versus a bad day, who their physicians are. Is it scrambled eggs or fried eggs? Is it zippers or buttons? What can they do for themselves? What do they need assistance with? The goal being to be able to utilize this information, both today as well as in the future, to allow anyone in our loved one's life to be able to understand them better, know what their needs are, and be able to get the best outcome possible for them.
I love that. And especially as a parent, it's, it weighs on us, right? It's like this kind of like thing we carry around going, oh, I need to outlive my kid, but we don't have any choice of that. And I know that sounds awful. So if you guys are watching going, what did she just say? She needs to outlive her kid. But if you're a special needs parent, you probably understand that. It's one of those scary moments in your life where you think, gosh, one day I won't be here. I hope I'm here, but there's no guarantee on that. And, let's be realistic. We shouldn't be if we're older than our kids, right? Like, let's just look at the circle of life. It's just kind of how it goes, right? And once you do this, it's kind of like, okay, I've done it. Whew. Now I can at least know if I don't outlive or I don't live forever, then I know there's a plan A and a plan B and potentially even a plan C, which I love. So let's jump into, basic conservatorship questions. Do parents of special needs children need to obtain, first of all, a conservatorship? And especially if they're guardians already. Like, I remember that was my question. Like, wait a second. I'm his mom. Why do I need to now go to court and do all this stuff? Like, it makes no sense. So when he's 17 years old and 364 days, I am totally his guardian. But when he turns 18, all rules are out the window.
Exactly. So a couple things there. Does every parent need to get a conservatorship? And the answer is no. It's not for every family. It is a tool. There's no cookie cutter for who your child is and what their needs are and what your situation is. So the answer is no, you don't have to. However, for those parents who who do feel the need to utilize a conservatorship, and it is very common in many cases for developmentally disabled. When a child is under 18 in California, you're considered a guardian. Doesn't matter. And so you know, if you're watching this from out of state, different states have different definitions of guardian and conservator. In some states, guardian may be under 18 and over 18. In California, for those under 18, you're a guardian, and those over 18 would be a conservatorship. So we'll speak in California language today, but understand that this is applicable across the board. So then the question is, there are different kinds of conservatorships, and many families ask, well, what are these different types? Why would I want a limited conservatorship versus a general or full conservatorship? And it's really, the difference is significant. A full conservatorship is typically reserved for elderly people who have become incapacitated and don't have that necessarily a long-term history of a developmental disability. So Alzheimer's or senility may come on, or they may be just unconscious and in a coma for some reason. That's when a full conservatorship would come into play. But for parents of children living with special needs, there's something called a limited conservatorship. And the idea is not to take away rights. That is often the fear of parents. We want to foster personal responsibility and development. This isn't meant to take away that. It's meant to help protect. So the idea behind a limited conservatorship is there are 7 different powers, and parents can pick which ones are appropriate. Typically, it's 5 of the 7. If all 7 were granted, that basically is considered a full conservatorship. And I'll go through what those different powers are and explain a little bit. But the beauty is that if your child, for instance, may be perfectly financially savvy, but have enormous fears about medical personnel or hospitals, things like that, well, then maybe a conservatorship allowing a parent to intervene for medical considerations and not necessarily financial is possible. Typically, they do go hand in hand, but just by way of example, it doesn't have to be that way, and there is no cookie cutter. So I often there are 2 examples that I like to use, and I know we've talked about this in the past before, Kristen. The first is, and this is the question to a family, how do I know if a conservatorship is appropriate? I don't know. I only know my child. How do I know it's appropriate? So one question that I often ask is, can you see your child going to the mall? Well, in the old days, we had malls. Oh, my goodness. And you remember those cell phone kiosks, the little things in the middle of the way? And if you can see your child getting pulled into one of those stores, the kiosks, and coming out with a $1,000 phone and a $300 a month cell phone plan, then that might be a consideration for conservatorship. Or even more, I've been approached this a lot of times. I use that cell phone example, and they say, well, what about a car? It's like, oh, wow, that's a big deal. And absolutely, I forget, lots of, especially boys, are into cars, and they can easily be talked into signing for something that they couldn't afford. If they're over 18 and are not conserved, if they were to enter into either of those contracts, they're enforceable, and it's really only up to the goodwill of the company as to whether they would release you from that or not. Under conservatorship, it is simply not a valid contract, and you don't have to worry about what the ramifications of entering into an agreement like that would be. So that's question number 1. And if that applies, then conservatorship might be something to really consider. The other one is when it comes to medical and healthcare. So we had a client who was a Special Olympian and was playing tennis out of state. So we were with mom, 19 years old, out of state, away from our family physician who we know and have a relationship with. Okay, so it's never been an issue in the past. The doctor at home knows who they are and knows the situation, and never insisted on legal paperwork and having a conservatorship. But in this case, we're out of town. And the tennis player broke his leg, and it was a compound fracture and really serious and needed immediate attention. So there's blood and bone and panic and fear and really scary. And we're going to see doctors in an ambulance, and just the whole scenario is really overwhelming. And the boy would not accept treatment. And mom's there insisting that he has to be seen. My son has a developmental disability. You have to see him. I'm his mom. I understand, but he's 19 years old and is technically an adult and is refusing treatment. Ultimately, mom was able to prevail and convince her son to allow treatment. But can you imagine if that didn't happen? So those are the two main questions I ask. And if you can see that, then it might be worth considering. But again, it's not to say that you are depriving someone of their rights. You want to be able to give them as much latitude as possible to be able to live and grow and develop.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And when I know, even if you have a child that, like Jackson with limited language, if he went into a mall, he wouldn't be able to, navigate his way in a typical way, right? At least. And so if you have a child like that too, or if you have a child, again, with limited language and doesn't really understand what the doctors are asking, that's another thing. So you may not have a child that's fighting you. You may have a child that's, used to mom and dad doing everything. They're developmentally delayed. They don't really understand. And, that's always my fear, and why conservatorship for us was something that was non-negotiable. It was, yeah, we're doing this. And again, as I talk to families, it's nothing that, at least for me, when I was pregnant, I didn't think, oh yeah, I can't wait till my child turns 18 and I can be his conservator. Like, never was that thought, ever even a thought. But when you have a child with special needs, different things come at you. And I know for me, and if you're watching, you might feel the same way, or you might have felt the same way. You don't want to think about it. It's easier just to go, oh, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to think about it. But at least from my, experience, the more you don't think about it, the more you're actually thinking about it, which makes it even more stressful, which just makes your life not as freeing as it could be, because, you just want that to be like, okay, I know it's taken care of. So if you are nervous, don't be. Like, there's people like David out there that can help you. And poor David has had to deal with me. So, and I'm not an easy cookie. So I feel like if he can deal with me, he can deal with anybody, because I have like 1,000,001 questions always. And so now, what does a conservator do? That's what a lot of people don't really understand. We think of Britney Spears, or at least a lot of people think of Britney Spears, because that's, for most of us, if you don't know what a conservator is, that's kind of the only one we've kind of heard of recently, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that is actually even a different type of conservatorship. So we talked about the limited, which is typically what we're going to look at. The Britney Spears situation is a type of conservatorship that was initiated by the state of California. It's called an LPS, which stands for Lanterman Petrus Short conservatorship. So Frank Lanterman, I forget when, decades and decades ago, was a real proponent of disability rights and created the regional center system that we see today. Lanterman.org, by the way, very useful website for all this type of information. My website also has stuff, but Lanterman's wonderful. What does a conservator do? Depending on what which powers were awarded by the judge in the conservatorship process, that is what they would be in charge of. So let me go through the 7 different powers and we'll go from there, okay? So you can choose from being able to decide where the person lives, being able to have access to their confidential records, including medical records, regional center records, school, mail, and other confidential papers relating to the conservatee, okay? They make decisions concerning education and vocation. They make decisions, they, as we discussed, restrict the ability to enter into a contract. So that's number 4. Number 5 is being able to give or withhold consent for the conservatee's medical treatment. So reserving consent would be, I want to go out and get some plastic surgery. Might not be the best thing. Not that that's unacceptable, but maybe a frivolous spending. It kind of goes in both buckets there. And then the last 2, number 6 and 7, typically have a higher threshold when it comes to applying. I have seen cases where we apply for 5 and the judge will award 7. I have seen cases where we've asked for 7 and they award 5. You never know. But typically number 6 and 7 have a little higher threshold, and that is 6 to be able to, I just bit my cheek. To restrict the conservatee's social and sexual contacts and relationships, and to be able to give or withhold consent for marriage. So those 2 have to meet a higher level that tends to be in the eye of the judge and the information that they're reviewing. So I guess it kind of makes sense to talk about, well, what is the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what is the process? Like, how long does this take? And, you know, how does a parent even go about it? And how long in advance should they? Like, is it 6 months? Is it 2 months? You know, what does that look like?
Perfect. So this is really what parents need to know. What are the nuts and bolts of this? What do I need to know? First of all, it's easier than you think. It's easier than families, the horror stories that you may have heard out there. What needs to be done? So there are attorneys who do this. There are also, and really you only need an attorney when there's going to be something sticky, where you need representation. Otherwise, it's just filling out paperwork properly, which is complicated, no doubt. California especially does not make it easy, but you don't need legal representation to stand there if everyone's in agreement. So let's say that in a typical situation that we work with, everyone's on the same page. It's a matter of filling out a questionnaire about your loved one. Typically now this will vary from county to county, but there is a fee waiver. So the typical fee for filing a conservatorship petition is a little over $1,100. However, if your loved one already receives SSI and or Medi-Cal, that fee can be waived. Kind of important. So we evaluate that, we apply for a waiver, we fill out all of the paperwork properly and submit it. Then we get a hearing date. So under normal circumstances, we're talking now and COVID hit, and literally we were going to submit your paperwork the week we shut down.
Yeah, so for people watching, just so you know, like David knows this, I was so ridiculously stressed out with this paperwork. My whole brain for months ahead of time was like, crying, the whole 9 yards. And I finally go, yes, I'm going to get it done. I get everything done. I get it on time to him. And then literally we're supposed to file. Everything looks great. COVID hits. Courts close down. So I then have to just say, I just have to let it go and know that there's nothing I can do. And it's honestly the crappiest feeling, but I know that it is what it is. And I did everything I could. So that's all I know. But just so you guys know, those that are watching, by the time you do this, if you haven't done it yet, the courts are going to be open. So don't worry, you don't have to go through what I went through.
So yeah, wow, what terrible luck. Now, also, there was nothing you could have done about this either, because you can't even submit anything until your loved one is 17 and a half or a little bit older. The court won't even accept it. So now, in a perfect situation, we have our paperwork in, it's all in order, and the court gives us a hearing date 3 to 4 months down the road. That's pretty typical in Los Angeles County. I wish I could speak for everyone. They all have their own flavor, but LA County takes 3 to 4 months to get a hearing. In the meantime, there are a few things that happen. The first is, the first is that your loved one is going to have their own attorney to represent them. They're called the PVP attorney, which stands for Probate Volunteer Panel. Wow, I remembered it. Probate Volunteer Panel attorney. And basically they're there specifically to make sure that your loved one's rights are not being taken away for no reason. They're there to protect them. On your end, there are 2 appointments that you need to make. One is with your family physician who knows your child, and they fill out what's called a capacity declaration form. And the other is to make an appointment with the regional center. There has to be a regional center evaluation that goes with it. So once those things are done, we put it all together. It goes to the judge and they evaluate this. On the day of your hearing, assuming it's as we've discussed and there's no one coming out of the woodwork and contesting anything. And by the way, all the family knows about this. Everyone's been notified that your loved one is going to be going to a conservatorship hearing. So once that happens, the day that you go, typically the judge is going to rubber stamp everything that they see, and you're able to walk away that day with your official letters of conservatorship. So from start to finish in a functioning world, 3 to 4 months.
Well, and I think it's so important for people to, again, know you are going to be afraid. Know it's going to, have that moment where you're probably going to cry. You're not going to like filling out these questions. Again, it is what it is, because if you're having to look at conservatorship or guardianship, regardless, depending on where you are in the country, as David said earlier, one part of the country calls it guardianship, another part calls it conservatorship. Because we're in California, we have to be special, so we call it conservatorship.
Always special.
Right? And so, I just want you guys not to be afraid. I mean, I can tell you, I felt so much better. And even David knows, I was like, okay, I did it. Here you go. It's on you now. I'm done. You deal with it. And I honestly, even when the courts closed down, I was actually surprised that I wasn't panicked. I was like, well, all right, you have everything I could do. And so it's on you now, David. So now how do people find out more about you?
So you can always see me at my website, serenitas.snp.com. That's SerenitasSNP.com. You can call me at 818-231-6759. Also, anyone that calls me, I have a book called The Beginner's Guide to Special Needs Planning Made Easy. All the things you didn't know you needed to know. Give me a call. Consults are complimentary. Always happy to help answer questions. And I promise it is easier than you think. It's the not knowing that creates the anxiety. Please, 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 if I can be helpful and answer questions as it relates to either conservatorship or anything in the special needs planning world, please don't hesitate to reach out.
I love that. And do you help others other than California?
Yes, we work nationwide. So United States, anywhere we can work with folks.
So guys watching, if you guys are in the United States, especially, and you're nervous, you're scared, it's a question that you don't even want to think about. Take David up on his free consultation, just having some of the questions answered. I know our first conversation was a good 40 minutes because I had a lot of questions, and I called around too. It wasn't like I just called David. David knows this. I called and talked to different people, and I just felt really comfortable with the answers he was giving me. He actually gave me answers that other people didn't even mention. And so I was like, wow, okay, he knows his stuff. So again, whoever you go to, just make sure they know their stuff. They're passionate about your family. They're going to be there for the long run to help your family. And I love that. So thank you so much, David, not only for doing this amazing interview, but also for helping my family too.
It is a reward and a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching. Until next time. Bye, guys.